Hello and welcome to Gold and Silver Assets. I'm Diora and it's Sunday the 23rd of January 2022. And I've entitled today's presentation Precious Clues. So of course we'll start with gold priced in US dollars on the weekly scale, and as I've said, things have been pretty boring for well over a year now, but particularly this past 6-7 months or so. We've just basically been moving sideways, and so we can't tell which direction it's going to make its next move. And so I've called this presentation Precious Clues because I've kind of been hunting around trying to see if there are any other clues that we can get to determine which direction this is going to break out. Now, of course, I'm talking about on the technical analysis side. Of course, there are lots of things we can talk about on the fundamental side, which we've talked about in so many previous videos before. Okay, so we looked at this chart in the last couple of weeks on the log scale, and I'd drawn this chart, and we've got multiple touches here from the very, very low back in 2019. We've got a couple of touches there. Couple of tiny little overshoots, but they're wicks only there. But then we've got another nice touch there, a nice one there, and more recently another one over here. So this is a pretty good trend line, and this is one that we don't really want to see breaking. But we also seem to be forming a bit of a symmetrical triangle. Now the thing is, this has to break before we get to this apex here. Okay, so this tells us we're not far off. Of course, we can't easily know which direction this is going to go. And of course, we're rooting for this upside. Many of us are. There are some that are rooting for downside, not because they want the price to go down, but because they want to buy more at a lower price as well. So where are we going here? Now, obviously, the last couple of weeks have been quite nice. We've seen a nice couple of green candles here. I think we need to really cross this 1860 level here. Once we cross that, I think our confidence levels can increase for further upwards movement. Okay, let's look a little bit more at some of these clues that I've been talking about. So one way of looking at gold is by looking at it in terms of other currencies. So one such thing would be the world currency unit. And again, I think today's chart I've mainly done on the weekly scale here. And again, I've put this on the log scale. Now here, I've only made two touches here. Obviously, you could draw another line that just goes through here, and it would probably kind of come through here, and this would be an overshoot wick. So that's another possibility. But there's obviously something holding things up over here, isn't there? But here we've got what looks like an ascending triangle pattern. And what we're looking for here is a decisive break above 1300. Again, we're getting close to that apex here. I think usually these patterns break out about 75% along the way, which it just kind of feels like we're pretty close to that. So yeah, watch out for that level there. But again, this doesn't really provide us with a clue because we're still in that triangle pattern. There's no breakout. So what can we look at next? Well, let's look at gold price in New Zealand dollars. On the weekly scale, I've put this on the log scale, and I've joined the 2019 low there with this wick over here, and we've got another touch over here more recently. Now what you'll see here is that this actually does look like it's broken out to the upside from the sideways move, you know. So there was obviously, particularly over here, there was I haven't drawn it perfectly, but yeah, it seems like almost like an ascending triangle there maybe. But the point is that we had significant resistance there, and it seems to have overcome that. and there's not much price action. So I think the next kind of resistance point is going to be 2,800 New Zealand dollars before we get a potential bit of a knockback, maybe even a little bit above because of this price action here. But to me, this candle here looks like a promising sign. This one I thought was interesting. So this is the gold to S&P 500 ratio. So what I've done is put gold and then divided by S&P 500 on TradingView, and I've got this on the log scale. And this spike here was in March 2020, and ever since then we've had this downtrend, but you can see we've had this very, very decisive break to the upside in this ratio. So obviously something's changed this week. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean gold's going to shoot up and skyrocket up from here? No, remember this is a ratio. So all this is telling us is how gold will is or could perform relative to the S&P 500. When this moves downwards, then that means that the S&P 500 is outperforming gold, whereas this breakout to the upside means gold is outperforming the S&P 500. Now, when I say outperforming, that doesn't mean that gold goes up necessarily. So outperforming could mean that, say, the S&P 500 drops, then gold would drop less, and that's what happened. That's what could happen if we get further up moves as well. So don't misinterpret this, okay? But what it does mean is that also if the S&P 500 does go up in percentage terms, then gold would outperform the S&P 500 if we get an uptrend here. So yeah, I just thought that bar had some significance here. And then I thought, well, why don't we look at the gold miners to S&P 500 ratio? Obviously, the gold miners have been long suffering, really battered down, particularly compared to, the S&P 500 darling stocks there. And so this is on the weekly scale again, on the log scale, and I've actually taken this back to 2012, and you can see what a battering this has had. Yeah. But to me, I mean, it looks like it's hammered out a bottomer over here. And remember that this can't go to zero, okay? And we're not far off from zero. So this seems to be a bottom over here. And what we seem to have is a kind of horizontal channel like this. There we go. Right. And what I've also done is draw this trend line just like I did with the gold. So this was in, again, March 2020 where we had this downtrend. And right now, that is bang on that line. So it hasn't quite broken out yet. But based on what we're seeing here, if you had a choice between going into the GDX or the S&P 500, this would suggest that the asymmetry favours the gold miners, just because the downside seems very, very limited compared to the upside. And if you look at this pattern, and if we get a breakout above here, that would suggest outperformance of the gold miners. Now, of course, yeah, I mean, some people might say, well, we could go up and down like this, for who knows how long. And that's true, but just looking at the fundamentals, the environment, I think it just seems unlikely to me. So yeah, this chart is not for prediction, but it tells us a lot about the asymmetry of the relative strength of these two assets here. Silver. Now, silver, as I've said so many times, is very, very tricky to deal with. And here we've just got, this has been a nightmare, hasn't it? It's been a complete nightmare. You get these spikes, long wicks here on both sides actually, and just moving sideways and frustrating people like crazy. And so, what do we make of this? Now, of course, we had a lovely move last week, like with this lovely green candle. But look, where are we going from here? I mean, is this going to turn around and flop back to that red line, or are we going to keep steaming upwards up here? This chart doesn't really tell you that, does it? So what do we do? Again, I thought, well, let's look at another currency. So this is silver priced in New Zealand dollars instead of US dollars, and the picture seems a little bit clearer here, doesn't it? To me, this looks like a descending triangle pattern here, and it's interesting because this price bar just bounced off of that upper trend line there. But what can we make from this? How can we interpret this? So in order to do that, what we can do is look at any research we've got on descending triangles, and I kind of alluded to this a little bit last week. So this is the work of Thomas Bulkowski. This is his website here. And so according to his site, if you've got a descending triangle, then you can look at volume, and that will recede 78% of the time. It can break out in any direction, and there's a 53% chance it will break out upwards. And the median distance to the breakout is usually 61 to 65% of the way to the apex. All right, so let's go back and have a look at that silver chart, and I've added some extra data here. So the first thing we talked about was volume receding. Well, that's certainly happening. This is definitely on the way down, and volumes are quite low over here, aren't they? So then the next thing is, well, when are we going to break out? Obviously, we can't tell which direction, but having an idea of when might be helpful. So I measured from this bar here to this one here, which is the apex, and that came out to 126 bars. And if we look at what is 61 to 65% of that, and we're looking at 77 to 82 bars. Right now we're at 76 bars, okay? So at some point in the next maybe 4 to 6 weeks, I mean, it could be sooner, it could be later. There's no fixed rule. And remember, this is kind of median ballpark figures, Sometimes these things can go even further. The further along the apex it goes, the stronger the move's going to be, though. But of course, we don't want to sit and wait till September. I think most people will have given up by then. But yeah, I'm thinking, I mean, this is usually pretty good here. So we're at 76 bars, okay? And so we've got to watch out for the next move here. This is the line that we want to see broken to the upside. And ideally, you want to see a breakout with high volumes. So a big green candle with a big green volume bar. But yeah, let's see. It just kind of feels like we're getting close. Now, it might be that I mean, we just literally just bounced off of that, and we may get a little bit of a dip before coming up like that. But I don't know. I just get the feeling this is going upwards. The other reason that I think that is if you kind of look at price targets. I mean, usually these things break out. When they break out, the target is the height of this triangle, really. And so if we think about that, then we'd be looking at prices kind of below 18, really. Now look, it's not impossible, I guess, but I mean look, the reason why I think it's unlikely is, remember, this is in New Zealand dollars, okay, and the low that occurred in March, that's over here, was just under 20, And so we're talking it going lower than it did back last March. And if you go back to the US dollar chart, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right or likely, but that's just my intuition and instinct telling me that. And I don't know, to me everything points to the upside for silver. It's just the question is the route it is going to take to get up there. Anyway, these are just some thoughts and ideas. What do you reckon? Have you seen any other clues that might indicate the direction of breakout? Whatever direction it is going to be big, just because of the way price, both in gold and silver, have been coiling up. And that usually is followed by something quite dramatic. Right. That's it from me for this week. Anyone got any ideas of what you want me to talk about next week's show? Anyway, I'll have a think as well. In the meantime, all the best, and we shall see you next week. Bye.